And welcome to this tutorial regarding the School of Counselling folder system. We're going to take a brief walk through the different folder structures and how we'll be using them on the course. So how are we going to use these folders in order to support you getting the qualification? Well, the primary goal at the end of the day for this course is to see you complete a portfolio of evidence, a collection of coursework in which you demonstrate through written work, discussions and the skill sessions your proficiency at a level 2 in counselling skills. So all that we do on the course supports you in gathering evidence to put into your portfolio. The first to look at is portfolio. So we classify the portfolio into 3 categories. This is where you will store your information relevant to the evidence type. So documents go into documents, testimony, which is effectively the feedback from the skill sessions, goes there, and tutor observations are through the discussions, and the tutor observations of the skill sessions are stored there as well. The other 2 documents in this portfolio are your candidate learning record, the CLR, and a completion statement. Briefly, the completion statement is that which you sign off at the end of the course saying this is all your authentic work, and then is finalised and verified by your tutor. The candidate learning record, however, is one that you will be using throughout the course and updating regularly as you achieve the evidence. So let's take a look at that first, because that will be your roadmap to what we are achieving and eventually where the gaps will be for you to then fill and ensure you submit the right work. So this is the candidate learning record. The CLR is your reference system for all the evidence you need to capture on the course, way of making sure you know where your gaps are, what you have completed, and ultimately a recording system that allows your tutor to verify and check the correct documents are there and that you have met the criteria. So now back to your portfolio. You have a sense now of what the CLR does, but how are we going to populate it and how are these other folders going to help us do that? Well, as mentioned, we have 3 folders here. One for documents, testimony, and tutor observations. Within this, there are some subfolders which help us place the work so it's easier to locate. And we're going to take a look at that now. Starting first with documents. So within your folder structure, you'll see something similar to this. 5 folders which break down what a document is into these 5 other categories. This allows you and your tutor to quickly see what documents are where and helps with that recording system for the CLR. Learning reviews. These are your typical pieces of work set on a weekly basis which capture the criteria for the course. Typically, these relate to the topic or the focus of the conversation in that lesson and are titled learning reviews. The next folder is assignments, but really it should be titled assignment because on our CPCAB Level 2 course, there is only one assignment that is required to be submitted. So any assignment will be stored here. The third folder is self-reviews. This is where we'll store the documents that have kind of captured our initial thoughts, our thoughts at the middle of the course and towards the end. They're there to look at how we are progressing in relation to the criteria or the overall learning outcomes. This is a chance to reflect on what's going well and where we need to improve. The fourth folder, peer observations. A quick word then about how these relate to skill sessions. On every lesson we will be having skill sessions in which within triads or dyads you'll be practicing the skills that you have learnt from that lesson and preceding lessons as well. In these triads there will be a helper and a helpee role as well as an observer. The observer is there to witness and notice what has been shared and discussed and offer any blind spots. Those will be collated, put together and then sent to the helper so that they have some reference of how well they're doing, what they could improve on. These documents from the observer to the helper are called peer observations. And folder 5, tutorial records. As it says on the tin, this is where you store the records from the conversations you have with tutors, which are formalized throughout the actual course, or informal ones which you want to capture the notes are written down and verified by your tutor. So a place to show your development, your learning, areas you're struggling with and how you're being supported. Learning reviews and peer observations are typically the folders you're going to use the most as we are constantly writing and setting work for those. So having now covered documents as forms of evidence, let's go back to the portfolio and look at the other types that we'll be capturing and where they'll be stored. So folder 2 is testimony. In this case, it'll have simply one folder which is entitled Provided Feedback. We won't spend too much time discussing the detail of this on this particular video. Suffice to say that when we mentioned before about the observations and that feedback being given to the helper, it also acts as evidence for the observer to show they have offered feedback. Here we call this peer feedback, or a PF. And in this folder we've named it, hopefully for simplicity and ease of understanding, Provided Feedback, the one in which the observer is demonstrating they have given feedback. And feedback is a crucial part of our learning as counsellors and on these courses. Returning back to portfolio, let's look at our final folder, Tutor Observations. Here we've broken that down into 3 different categories. Again, all evidence, all leading to portfolio, and all captured and noted on the CLR. In reverse order, Tutor Observations. There are formal observations your tutor will do on your skill sessions, typically a third of the way in and towards the end of the course. Those observations are collected and then saved in your tutor observations. For folder number 2, tutorial feedback, this identifies the feedback you receive from your tutor. But when you're having your tutorial with your tutor, you will be presenting particular things you'd like to talk about, what's on your mind. They will add on their thoughts and reflections, sign that off, and this then becomes further evidence of your tutorial feedback. And this is where you'll store that. Finally, in this folder, we have tutor witness statements. This is a folder you will visit quite frequently. As part of the course, we do set written work on a regular basis. But in order to limit that amount of written work and increase the benefits of rich discussions that are facilitated in that learning space, that allows us to actually meet criteria through some proper discussions and focused attention on criteria, we then use something called tutor witness statements. These are effectively criteria being witnessed in action. Once done, this is where you'll store those statements, and much like learning reviews, will become the bulk of the work alongside the peer observations. Back to the portfolio. So that concludes the core part of the portfolio. What I hope you take away from this is the storage space for the final pieces of coursework that demonstrate your ability and proficiency in the counselling skills. And to be clear, this is where you store all the work that has been assessed and marked as meeting criteria. A little hint which is quite useful is to begin early on. When you've got the criteria awarded and saved, move it into your portfolio and update your CLR. So then, if portfolio is the top of the tree, what about the rest of these folders? What do they do and what do they mean? So my first suggestion is, when you get access to your student folder, is to go to the Student Action Guide. This breaks down the simple actions that are required throughout the course, ones which will become increasingly familiar, but as you start and you're dealing with the admin and getting used to all this new structures, this is your go-to guide for getting a quick answer on what to do when something happens. It's a trigger guide, if you like, to say when you submit work, you need to do this. When you have mark returned, this is what you need to do. We have a rich and robust range of information and guides on the course, but they can be quite weighty to get through. The action guide breaks us down to the actual sequences you do on a regular basis to hopefully demystify some of the admin that can get overwhelming at times. So the Student Action Guide is your friend in those early weeks of the course to better understand what is required when certain things happen. But if you really want to go in depth regarding our policies and procedures, you have that at hand. The Information and Guides folder has a whole range of further files which help you better understand all the policies and guides that you need for the course. These will be revisited throughout the course in some form, but are there to help you. Again, we appreciate this may feel overwhelming. There's so many folders to read, which ones will you work on? The action guide is that first step if you're unclear. If you need more clarity and more specific details, you can come to your information and guides and find something that's particularly related. So the next folder to look at is templates. As you can see, these are Word documents that we'll be using relatively regularly on the course. You can go through these at your own time. I'm just going to highlight 2 for the time being, because they're the ones you'll use most frequently throughout the course. Let's start with the peer observation of skills. As you'll recall, we've been looking before at observations being a big part of the course. So these documents are the ones you use on a regular basis. This is where you're giving feedback to your helper and demonstrating that you are able to give feedback to your helper as well. The other document I'm going to take some time to explain is one that's probably used the most frequently throughout the course. This is the Criteria Assessment Sheet, or for brief, the CAS. For every piece of work that we do, whether it be the tutor observations, a learning review, an assignment, we always need to include a CAS with our work. The CAS is a header sheet that, one, allows the tutor to offer feedback, allows you to clearly identify the criteria you're aiming for, and has space to obviously then do your writing, be your learning review, assignment, and what have you. A CAS has to be included with every piece of work that you are asking to be marked for criteria. It's saved as your template simply because you'll use it so frequently. This one has been filled out a little in advance just to demonstrate what that can look like. Core thing to remember is for every piece of work you are claiming criteria, we require a CAS sheet. So the final few folders. Well, archive is, as it says, a place to put things you no longer require. It's up to you with what you do with the archive, but it's there as a place to store and not typically used for any other way. This then leaves the final 2 folders. Think of these as your in and out tray. This is where you'll submit work and then have it returned marked. This is where that communication between your tutors will continue throughout. So as an example, once you've completed a piece of work with your CAS as a header, in whatever form that is, you'll be saving it in your ready to mark folder. Once marked and returned, your tutor will return it into your assessed work folder. Successfully completed and gaining criteria, you will move it from your assessed work into your portfolio and into the correct subfolder. The important part is keeping an eye on both these folders, making sure that that is marked, is moved into portfolio, or if it's saved to archive, and that ready to mark doesn't contain work that has already been assessed. This remains the role and the responsibility of all students to maintain their workflow and ensure it's clearly and easily findable by the tutors. So that gives you an overview, as bite-sized as possible, of what's involved in your student folder structure.